Hello. Good afternoon from Washington, D.C., and good evening for those joining us from Europe and the Middle East. My name is Anas Al-Qaid, and I am the Director of Programs at Gulf International Forum. Um, Allow me to welcome you to today's event, today's program, book talk with Dr. Diana Galeeva on her new book, Russia and the GCC, the Case of Tatarstan's Paradiplomacy. A very timely and interesting topic. We are excited to host this book talk, and would like to also welcome back Dr. Katz to moderate this important discussion. Dr. Katz, without further ado, the screen is yours.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Anas. Appreciate being here, and it's a very great pleasure to introduce Dr. Diana Galeeva to talk about her new book, Russia and the GCC, the Case of Tatarstan's Paradiplomacy. Dr. Galeeva, she had quite an interesting background. She got her bachelor's degree at Kazan Federal University in Russia. She has an MA from Exeter University in the UK and a PhD from Durham University in the UK. When she, was in Tatarstan, she worked for the President of Tatarstan's office for the Department of Integration with Religious Associations, and then with the Cabinet of Ministers of the Republic of Tatarstan. She has very prolific. She also had a book this past year on Qatar, and she's currently a non-resident fellow here with the Gulf International Forum, and she is now a visiting research fellow at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies. And so, without further ado, Professor Galeeva, why don't I turn the floor over to you?
Thank you so much, Professor Katz, and good afternoon, good evening. First of all, I would like to thank the Gulf International Forum for this treasured opportunity to organize a book launch. My deepest thanks to you, Professor Mark Katz, for initially supporting the idea of writing this book, and in addition also offering very valuable reviews during the process of writing the book. I'm grateful to Professor Eugene Rogan and Dr. Michael Willis of St. Anthony's College, Willis Center, who recognized the importance of this research and offered me the opportunity to work on this at Oxford University. Also, I must thank Dr. Khaled Al-Khaheri, the Chancellor of Mohammed bin Zayed University for Humanities, for his generous support of this project, in particular the opportunity of creating an Arabic edition supported by the university. This will promote wider audiences for the book and share key points and importance of this. And none of this would happen without the generous support of also interviewees in Russian region republics and the Gulf in the GCC states, and everyone who believed in this project and in my scholarship. Thank you so much for everyone. So my primary focus, scholarly focus, lies on the GCC countries, but the Republic of Tatarstan, where I originate, continues to inform and empower the direction of my scholarship. As I wrote in the preface, the journey of my first author book, Qatar, the Practice of Rented Power, started in the Republic of Tatarstan, and I was in turn at the office, at the presidential office in 2012, when I first became really to think and be curious about what's the elements of particular type of power that can transform small republics such as Tatarstan, or even in a bigger scale, like small states who are usually perceived as a secondary players in international relations theory into influential actors. Although this alternative type of power, rented power, was suggested based on the case of Qatar, in my mind, this model could also be applied in Tatarstan. And I believe this second book, Russia and the GCC, the Case of Tatarstan Paradiplomacy, is in a way a practical continuation of this line on thinking, illustrating the important role played by Tatars in both the Soviet and modern Russian periods. The idea of writing this book was conceived while I was traveling to the GCC states, and especially to religious forums and conferences, such as, for example, Abu Dhabi Forum for Peace. And I noticed that in such gatherings, there were in that particular period of time very limited number of Russian Muslims authorities. Although I recall the very important role of Soviet Muslims who played a very important role in building these links with the Arab countries and modern kind of Gulf states in 1920s and 30s. For example, during the World Muslim Congress in Mecca in 1926, where King Abdulaziz sought to position himself as the guardian of the holy cities after his conquest of the Hijaz, Mufti Riza Fakhreddin, who was the head of the Soviet delegation in that forum, and also he was the Soviet Mufti, the head of the Central Muslim Spiritual Board of Internal Russia and Siberia, was elected as one of the two co-chairmen of this World Muslim Congress. Another illustrative example is Karim Hakimov of Tatar region, and the first Consul General granted Abdulaziz Al Saud formal recognition as the King of Hijaz and Sultan of Nesht in February 1926. Thereby, the USSR became the first state to establish full diplomatic relations with the Kingdom of Hijaz and Nesht, and over 90 years later, another politician of Tatar region, Rustam Minikhanov, the current head, or how we call him, Rais of the modern Tatarstan Republic, was chosen to carry the invitation of the Russian President Vladimir Putin to King Salman of Saudi Arabia during his business trip in 2017, and is this as the result of it the very much historical visit occurred of Saudi leadership to Russia. And perhaps this moment cannot be compared with seismic kind of event of 1926, but the visit certainly indicated a new wave of cooperation between two countries and the change in world politics. There are certainly parallels with this kind of unique privileges that have been granted to the Russian Muslim Republic of Tatarstan by the federal government, and accessibility of collaboration shown by in this particular case, Saudi Arabia. But in general, if I show in the book in general the importance of bridging this relation with all GCC states. But I noticed that in most scholarship, when I started to look at this subject, that these relations between Russia and the Gulf, they were understood through kind of economic collaborations, the importance of energy, for example, or military investments. But also there were debate of importance of Russia as in the one of important kind of external players in the MENA region, especially after the intervention to Syrian war or Libya. And this kind of important Islamic identities which share Russia and the GCC states, they were in a way overlooked. And to illustrate the role of Tatars, in particular in this relation between Moscow and Gulf relations over the last 100 years, Chapter 1 introduces the argument of the book and its relation to IR theory through a brief examination of constructivist position in IR theory, through a brief examination of the constructivist approach which I am applying for this book, and further it in chapter 2 and 3 discusses relations during the Soviet time, kind of this very limited links between TASSR and the GCC states, and explains why it happened. And then in chapter 5, it's more focuses on 4 and 5. It's more focuses on the modern Russia and shows more existing links and reasons for that between the Tatarstan and the GCC states. Also, chapter 6 examines other Russian Muslim republics, to also paradiplomatic efforts such as Chechnya, Ingushetia, Dagestan, Bashkortostan in their relations with the Gulf states. And finally, Chapter 7 was produced during the finalization of the manuscript and offers some possible scenarios resulting from the Ukraine conflict, especially its impact on further relations between Moscow, Kazan, and the GCC states. And I hope that among the key contributions of this book, this book really explains in a way the most now discussed the kind of hedging policies towards the Ukraine conflict of some of the GCC states, like especially by Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. And I think this book explains that important role which also played this Muslim factor and in a way Tatars to bridging these both regions and to bring closer this Moscow and the Gulf states in a time of global volatility. So I will stop here, I suppose, and then I'm happy to answer all your questions that you have.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Galeeva. This is, I think this is really highly important research. And I think it also, I hope, opens the door to similar studies. I mean, you focused on Tatarstan and the Gulf. I'd like to see someone write on Chechnya in the Gulf, on Ingushetia and the Gulf, Dagestan and the Gulf, Itakdalia. This would be something that should be done. Also, I think that what I'm hoping is that we see perhaps see your own work extended. In other words, not just Tatarstan and the Gulf, but for the entire Middle East. And obviously, the Middle East is very special for the Muslim republics of Russia, but I shouldn't be surprised if they have foreign policies that are active farther afield. I certainly remember back in the 1990s, when there would often be a Tatar delegate in missions from groups of Russian businessmen or scholars or what have you, that this was something that we would see. And so I think that this is a very rich field. I have, before turning to the audience, I have a few questions of my own I'd like to pose to you. And I just, one is to what extent does Tatarstan pursue an independent policy toward the Gulf? And to what extent does it coordinate its policy toward the Gulf with Moscow?
This is very interesting question, Professor Katz, and thank you for your comments. They are very important to consider. And with regards to your question, I think that we definitely, as the book, apply the category of global paradiplomacy, and that means that the state or the republic, as part of the Russian Federation, it's able to build its economic and political relations within the frame of paradiplomacy and under which is follow kind of the federal policies. So according to the law, existing law in 1996, the prerogative of the Foreign Office, these countries are not able to independently build economic or political relations, like Republic of Tatarstan or Chechnya or other republics who play quite important role also building these relations. But I suppose that their existing and their integration to the Russia's foreign policy is a soft power tool, is one of the also work I just published, and I show this kind of the mechanism how the Russia applies as a soft power elements to bring to develop the soft power initiatives, in addition to, like, for example, media like the Russia Today Arabic, or for example Россотрудничество. Also, I think this Muslim factor and these elements, like the group of the strategic vision Russia and the Muslim world, or these paradiplomacies of these republics, especially Tatarstan, or for example the spiritual diplomacy of different religious organizations, they play a very important role for implementing these soft power initiatives, but under the kind of the approval of the federal government.
I see. Thank you so very much. Okay. Another question I have is, would you say are different Muslim republics inside Russia in competition with each other in their relations with the Gulf, or do they more or less speak with one voice?
This is another great question, and thank you so much for that. I've been working on this research in very interesting time, I suppose, for the region and for the GCC states and for Russia. And now I will explain further why. So for the GCC states, that I started to look at it during the Gulf crisis, which occurred in 2017 until 2021. So from one side, like Quartet, Saudis, Emiratis, Bahrainis, and Egypt, and on the other hand, Qatar. And for me, it was very interesting to see, because the Russia was following this kind of the balancing sides policy, and that was one of the indicative kind of win-win policy which Russia tried to in recent years rely on, and it was quite, I would argue, successful. And then I just wanted to see also how these Russian Muslim republics also were integrated, and how they were, what's the kind of their diplomacy was, paradiplomatic efforts. And I found that, for example, for Chechnya, it was quite important to build relations more with Quartet, I think, states, and with more with Emiratis. And that's quite interesting example of the Grozny conference, which we know about, and the, I think, implications of that. I would argue more there, more in favor with this stance of more Emirati stance of considering kind of some organization, including Muslim Brotherhood, which fitted to the idea of that crisis, and one particular side, which is the Quartet side. At the same time, also we saw the kind of the deteriorated in a way relation between the head of Tatarstan, Chechnya Republic, with the spiritual leader of Muslim Brotherhood, Sheikh Al-Qaradawi. And when Kadyrov was very negatively kind of commented for Sheikh Qaradawi's comments about Russia's intervention to Syria, that we should see kind of this in very negative way. And I found that this kind of dynamics, in a way, they also shaped this relations to Chechnya being more closer to the Quartet position that time. At the same time, also in Ingushetian example, I started to view that Ingush leaders, they just the president of Ingushetia, he went to Qatar and also met one of the representatives of the organization which is related with the Muslim Brotherhood, which was quite also interesting for me, because for Russia it was also kind of a banned organization. But at the same time, for political and pragmatic purposes, they met with each other and tried to bring investments, for example, for Islamic university to build in Ingushetia. But also there were other dynamics between Chechnya and Ingushetia, the same period of time in 2019 of the border dispute between them. So in a way, they were kind of not competing with each other, but there were also very complex relations, and they reflected their policy towards these countries. Then with in Dagestan, for example, I think that they were more neutral position, but they were trying to build or just a relation with all sides. And for Dagestan, which I found interesting because I did also their field work, they also with official kind of this version of building relations, or they were also having non-official relations built through diaspora. And so, for example, one of the high-level representative was explaining me, like, if we have some like Dagestanis in Dubai, for example, they would just call them, see, like, can you help with some meetings, and they would try to help them and also to discuss that. That's another element and mechanism which I found quite fascinating, because I didn't find this unofficial, in a way, mechanism in other cases, like, for example, in Tatarstan or Bashkortostan. With regards to Tatarstan and Bashkortostan, I think the policies in general were somehow similar. So it more just interest in developing like through religious, it's Hajj and Umrah with Saudis, for example, or with economic collaborations, especially with Emiratis and with Qataris for the and Bahrainis in some regard for Tatarstan case, and the one of the leading kind of theme was to build relations through Islamic banking and finance, as the head of the Tatarstan calls it's like the Islamic lifestyle. So this lifestyle, Islamic lifestyle, could be in economy, could be in pharmacy, so everywhere, and just which in a way good effective tool to build these relations with the GCC states. At the same time, in Bashkortostan, also I found that it's quite interesting. They were trying to develop a relation with Kuwaitis, for example, which were less in Tatarstan or other republics collaborations, and they were offering them kummus, which is like a well-known Bashkir kind of this milky drink, and it's the Kuwaitis were quite more interested to in production of this product. That was interesting. Another interesting observations and where the competition perhaps would lie between Tatarstan and Bashkortostan, the legacy of as I mentioned, Tatar Karim Hakimov, who was the first kind of the general, the consul to the kingdom of Hijaz and Nesh, and because he was originally a Tatar, but at the same time he was born in the now territory of Bashkortostan. So, and I think there are some competition in this regard who is kind of has this legacy. And it was very interesting when I did also field work in Bashkortostan. I met with a high level representative there, and they were telling me in 2019 it was in Ufa, which is the capital of Bashkortostan. It hosted the group of the strategic vision meeting, and a lot of Saudis, they just came to Bashkortostan, to Ufa, to see the homeland of this person Karim Hakimov, and he definitely played a very important role. I write about this specifically in my book in chapter 2. But unfortunately, he was under the Stalin repressions. He was executed, as most of kind of Muslim religious scholars or diplomats that period of time. So, and then according to the scholars and kind of historians, they still believe that because of this fact, Ibn Saud knew about this, and then he just frozen relation for 70 years with the USSR, and then after this also the situation with Hakimov, also in Saudi Arabia was found like oil reserves, and still there are like discussions even in Bashkortostan. I found this that they are saying that maybe the situation will be completely different if that time Soviet kind of would realize more importance of this Muslim factor and more further integrate this Muslim factor in their policies, because mainly it was only in 1920s and 30s, and then Soviets started to in very limited capacity to use it, or for example in 70s they again started to realize importance of this factor, but they more started to bring like kind of this Central Asian religious scholars in this in this process, because of the kind of the threat which it was considered from Taiser and from the Tatars, Bashkir, and the threat of duality of power in a way. So anyway, I think maybe we can return for these historical reasons, but I think that here the competition are, but in a way, definitely regions are very interested in bringing investments to the regions. I suppose this can be one of the competition. But again, I think Tatarstan is one of the leading republics in this regard, because for example, in different forums, in Dubai Investment Forum, for example, Tatarstan represent in its own kind of republic and its own capacities. So there isn't any place where all Russian regions are presented in one place, and to show the kind of all of them, I think, through the different mechanisms which I tried now to explain, they try to build this relation with GCC states.
Very good, thank you. This is just so fascinating, and I have so many questions. But one question I think I have in particular is that I think we understand generally what Tatarstan, other Russian Muslim republics, get from the Gulf. Obviously, there's important investment component, maybe trade. But looking at it the other way around, what do the Gulf states get out of having good relations with the various Russian Muslim republics? Why don't they just relate to Moscow? I mean, are the different Muslim Republican governments useful for lobbying Moscow? What exactly do the Gulf states get out of all this?
From my understanding and looking at the GCC states policies, I think they try to diversify in general their links, and especially with this the countries and this where is this component of the Muslim kind of component, and this been like for a long time the policies of the GCC states, like for example offering foreign aid to the Muslim world, and it was the Kuwaitis were doing, then Qataris, Emiratis, Saudis. It was very commonly, but I think recently we could see a lot of kind of this dynamics shifting towards the kind of this the post-Soviet space in a way, and I think this is related also with the place of the GCC states themselves. So I think after the Arab Spring, they emerged as the regional powers, and after some, especially during the COVID, for example, period, they offered like global aid and started to influence even more broadly. And now also with this Ukraine crisis, we also see that the kind of the GCC states capacities, like especially in their as being energy rich countries, now they are shaping energy market. Now they are considered as an alternative source for European needs in energy, for example. So I think this the kind of the growing importance of this the GCC states, and at the same time also understanding of also kind of our this kind of diversification of its partners towards in general to the rest of the world. And I think that the end especially I see towards the Muslim world, and this in Russia there are more than 25 Muslim population. That's I think also important kind of the kind of actors also to consider whether they are lobbying them. If I would have opportunity to ask this question from the kind of GCC leaders, I would ask them. But from my understanding, it's like win-win for everyone. So on the one hand, GCC states are getting more prestige in these countries. At the same time, perhaps also they are building relations. It's like win-win. So Russia wins more closer relation with the GCC states, and GCC also winning through this third kind of actors who are bridging this kind of Moscow and the Gulf states.
Right. Just following up on that, do you see any sign at all of different GCC states competing with one another for influence in the various Russian Muslim republics? Are they, in other words, are they just separately following their own policies, or are they looking at one another and seeing what the other one's doing in these different places?
I think that for all of these countries, the kind of republics are important in regard, but there are different fields through which these collaborations are happening. So, for example, with Saudi Arabia, I believe this more through the kind of the religious links with Hajj, Umrah, with and also developing of the, for example, with the Islamic Bank of Development, for example, this development of Islamic banking and finance. At the same time, also with, for example, with Emiratis, also these efforts to develop Islamic banking and finance also was quite important. I also with the kind of the case of Qatar, because of the World Cup, for example, also there were some discussions of kind of having volunteers from Tatarstan and kind of bringing them there. So I think that it depends from the each country's interest. In a way, and in particular period. For example, like a lot of now relations are built through education. Education, for example, that's quite interesting. So I think it depends from everyone's like agenda and policies.
Very good, very good. One question I have is that I've read in the past that in Syria, Russia and Iran cooperate together, but that the Chechen forces in Syria don't play well with Hezbollah or the Iranians. Now, of course, what Chechnya does is kind of sort of unique to itself and its own leader. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how Tatarstan and perhaps some of the other Russian Muslim republics relate toward Iran. In other words, do we see them as actively involved with Iran as they are with the GCC states? Well, what is the status of those relationships?
This is very interesting about Iranian also the factor. I suppose that we should differentiate here, and for example, this kind of through this religious or Muslim factor, if we consider, because in Shia population mainly dominated in Republic of Dagestan, in Derbent. So that's why I found that in my field work, so there are less relations with, for example, with the Gulf states, but at the same time, because of the geographic proximity, more relations with Iran occurred of Dagestan, for example. For Tatarstan, because this is more the republic more interested in economic development, economic diversification, building more economic relations. So, and Iranians are also important for building these links. And especially, I think now with all of this, the geopolitical transformations, with kind of the sanctions which both Iran and Russia are going through. So I think now Tatarstan also in a way plays an important platform to develop some links with Iranians through kind of also building Islamic banking, finance. That's just, I think that's what are happening with Iranians, just economic interest also. And we saw that that there were a lot of exchanges between the leadership of Tatarstan and with the Iranians currently, especially.
I really hope you'll write an article on this. This is, I think, a fascinating topic. Another question that I have is, okay, so we talk about how Tatarstan, other Russian republics, obviously they have some governmental capacity to relate to the GCC states. Can you tell us anything at all about the presence of Tatars and other Russian Muslims in the federal structures, whether it's the Russian Foreign Ministry or the military? In other words, to what extent is there a Russian Muslim presence in Moscow, and does this sort of help these Russian Muslim republics, or sort of how does that look?
I think currently we need to firstly differentiate to discuss the kind of legal changes and the power structure and in Russia. And now I think it's more centralized in the federal level with the new legislation in 2022 with the Kashvenikov legislation, which now allows to appoint to the federal government like the deputy of the ministers at the regional government, and this also in a way. And now all the heads of the kind of the regions are appointed by also the federal government. And so in a way, and the question also was about the autonomy of these republics. So where I'm trying to where is the logic now? So I think that in a way, while probably these regions, they are a bit losing autonomy in a way, kind of, but maybe also they are more offered opportunities to build closer with relation with the Muslim world, and we in the future we will see these actors more integrated into federal policies and building relation with the GCC states. Also now at the federal level we see more actively playing for example, Deputy Prime Minister Marat Husnuli, who is originally also from Tatarstan. I started to notice that also, for example, he plays quite important role in different events, for example, the Kazan summit or the other international Muslim forum, which took place just in Moscow in December. I noticed that this person started to be. It doesn't mean that the head of the Tatarstan Republic, also Rustam Nurgalevich Minnikhanov, plays very important role. Other regional leaders also, like Ramzan Kadyrov, still playing very important role in their diplomatic efforts. But I think that in a way, we can see some shifts towards the federal kind of the federal level. And also now this Kazan summit, which normally was organized by the patronage of the Tatarstan Republic, now will be under patronage of the federal center. So does it mean that in a way Tatarstan are losing a bit their capacities to build links with the Muslim world? I wouldn't say so. I think that Tatarstan still will be the key player, and in general, Tatars will be key players to keep this relation with the Muslim world, because I think why it's happening now, because I think with this Russian policies with Easternization, to looking to the east, building relation with China or India, with China, for example, no limit this partnership. The same time, also in latest all-day speech of Putin, a lot of observers saw the very important role of Islam, which plays in that role, and I think that it also reflects further foreign policies of Russia, which will be more towards the Muslim world, and I think they just need more actors and more effective actors to play and to look at this direction, because I think this is quite important in current geopolitical dynamics.
We have a question from the audience. Has President Erdogan, who presented himself as a leading Muslim figure, attempted expanding Turkish influence among the Russian Muslim republics, or did Moscow use the Russian Muslim republics to strengthen relations with Ankara? I guess not really mutually exclusive possibility.
Again, who is winning? Everyone, I think, winning from Tatars and from these actors. But in general, it's quite very important. Thank you for this question. Question in general, because Tatars are they are Turkic nation, and the relation with Turkey been very important since historically with Ottomans, although maybe in the last kind of connections how were Ottomans with our Turkey in general with Crimean Tatars, but Kazan Tatars were also quite close to Turkey, and still after 90s, especially for example when with under the modern Russian under modern Russia, also there were a lot of investment from Tatarstan, also from Turkey to Tatarstan, and for example in the places like special economic zones, you Alabuga, you would have like 80% are just Turkish companies, and also the Tatarstan the head of Tatarstan, he would travel quite a lot to Turkey and trying to kind of also it was because I was part of the delegation once, and it's very interesting how he kind of speaks in Tatar and then the counterpart would answer like different level in Turkish, so you would feel like they speak in one language and they understand like each other value based like mentality wise. So I think this in diplomacy, this cultural diplomacy play a very important role. That's why most the kind of investors were from Turkey. Also in that the incident what happened with Russia's shot of Turkish airplane in Syria, Tatarstan head of Tatarstan, he played also kind of very mediating role because they understood we have a lot of investment in Tatarstan, and if the relation would be deteriorated, so then the Republic would lose a lot from this investment. So, and they were trying to be very balanced, very neutral, trying to bring both sides to discuss these issues. I think that in that time particularly, and it's not just my opinion, when I did field work I also kind of heard this kind of view, and it's very strong view on the role of in general Tatars and the Minhan's role in general kind of foreign policy, especially towards Turkey. But at the same time, which is very interesting as well, after this incident in Syria, I started to notice that more GCC countries are traveling to Tatarstan, and they try to view more Tatarstan capacities. And I think also Tatarstan learned in that period of time that we should diversify our kind of relations with other actors. And definitely Gulf states became one of the key for that, especially Dubai, for example, with all these conferences, forums for Tatarstan was quite important, and they were started to play kind of to diversify. Similarly, like GCC were trying to diversify their relations with the rest of the world, including Muslims in Russia. So for Tatarstan, it also was the same policies. So everyone was winning just for that.
Very interesting. Now I know, in the past, Moscow has been a little more concerned about the possibility of Turkish influence with the Russian Muslim republics, and less so about Iranian influence. I remember hearing at a session under the Chatham House rule, for the benefit of the audience, that's one can report what was said, but not who said it or where it was said. I heard a scholar indicate that the Iranians, in fact, are encouraging conversion to Shiism in various Russian Muslim republics, which are primarily Sunni, in Dagestan in particular. And I'm just wondering, is this a policy that the Iranians are pursuing more broadly among Russian Muslim republics, or is it just Dagestan, or what? How can you enlighten us on this particular factor?
About this, I heard that it's just happening in the North Caucasus, particularly. I don't see that because Iranian influences, they are just so practical. And these relations with the Sunni republics, whether it's Bashkortostan or Tatarstan or whatever, that's just built on just kind of cultural ties, or maybe education or exhibitions, for example, can be. But I don't see that really really they are quite influencing to the converting the kind of Sunnis to Shiism. So I think that in North Caucasus there are like some foundations for that because of already the existence of Shia population there, and also in a way in your regard in the kind of question about competition between, for example, Chechnya and Dagestan, maybe this also because of the Chechnya was quite close to the Gulf states, and also perhaps also Dagestanis were in Dagestan were close to Iran, and these dynamics were happening. So I suppose that there are more also this kind of regional dynamics also shape the relations in the North Caucasus. But from my understanding, what in Tatarstan, I cannot see the same dynamics. It's just purely economic, cultural relations, or yes, and actually with this this news about the kind of the factory of building drones, one of the I read, I don't know, I'm not sure is it right or not information, but one of the consideration to build it's actually in the special economic zone in Alabuga, which is part of Tatarstan. So because of the lot of investors were leaving Western, because of the Western sanctions, they were leaving the this special zone. Now they are trying to attract more Middle Eastern kind of investments, and perhaps now Iranians, giving the current circumstances with this kind of working on the de-dollarization, for example, of this payment. They kind of have the same payment system like Shihab in Iran or Emir in Russia, and all of this kind of these transformations. I think that in a way they would affect. And when I was also in field work in Russia, I also heard that some Tatarstan kind of companies, they were sending some representatives to Iran to learn how they are living under sanctions. So I think this experience, and also when I was in Chatham House, in other I think discussion, the speaker was pointing out that about the Iranian, Russian kind of now how they learn from Iranians to overcome sanctions, and also and it's happening through kind of some GCC states to import some products. But I think that the same, I think, happening with the regions as well. They should learn now, and they should adapt now within the current realities, because before it was the Tatarstan for them was quite a priority to build relation with the Western companies, for example, to bring investment from the West. Now under current realities, the real kind of capacities I see only capabilities only from bringing investment from the MENA region, and especially GCC states, and in this regard Iran, if we would move to the kind of more military economy because of the current Ukraine crisis, I mean, perhaps we would see more the role of the regions in this regard as well.
Interesting. Well, it's good that we're turning to sort of the impact of the Ukraine war. Now, we understand that a lot of Russians have left Russia for various other countries, including a number who've gone to Dubai in particular. And I'm wondering, do we see this also with either Tatars or other Russian Muslims? Do we see them flocking to other countries, including the Gulf?
This is very interesting question. I'm just working everywhere in all discussions, and there are different figures. How many Russians flew Russia and whatever, and there are not real kind of figures on that regard. So so it's quite difficult to say how many people left the country in general. And then if we specifically speak about the kind of regional aspects and how Tatars in general, yeah, definitely there are people who live in Dubai and in other GCC states, and I think there are diasporas, and they were quite active. For example, in Tatarstan, we have our representative, Tatarstan economic representative in Dubai. So, and I personally, and I wrote it in the book, even if there are these Tatars or Muslim diasporas, I think it offers more opportunities to collaborate between the GCC states and between these kind of actors, because in a way they understand the kind of how both works in Russia economy, and they understand how it works in the GCC states, the economy, what's the kind of the values, how we can develop these relations. I don't know. I think that it more offers a lot of opportunities for further collaboration rather than yeah, I mean, I also, that's what I've been following also, that some Russians, they want to open new companies, or they are just trying to, if we speak about ordinary people, if we speak more higher level, that bringing kind of businesses, yeah, I mean, definitely who is winning. And I with regards with the Ukraine crisis, I just want to be clear. My position is that I think that the only winners from this situation are GCC states. So because of this competition between the great powers are now happening, and in a way there will be some weakening sources. It also offers opportunity now to the GCC states to kind of to follow these national policies, but at the same time also diversify their relations with the rest of the world. It's not just Europe, Russia, it's about China, it's about other like Central Asia. We could see now, for example, Lukashenko was in Emirates, but then he went to China. Or for example, the Tokayev, Kazakhstan president, he was in Emirates. Then U.S. Blinken was Secretary of State of Blinken. He went to Kazakhstan, and because of this kind of the Central Asia become also, and post-Soviet space are becoming so interestingly to observe currently in current situations, and I think. As part of kind of bridging between China and Russia, and with all of these sanctions and all of these dynamics, and I think it opens for the Gulf states a lot of opportunities economically, geopolitically, politically in general, diplomatically, because they have power capacities, their economic strength, and I think they just can further use that for their own political reach.
Very interesting point. Yeah, I've often thought that the multipolar world doesn't necessarily benefit the great powers, but the smaller powers, that they're the ones who are able to take advantage of competing great powers, and they appear to be doing so. But you indicated that obviously, there's this intensification of relations between the Tatarstan, say, and the GCC. I'm just wondering, does the closer relationship between Russia and Iran, with Russia now dependent on Iran for drones and for other things, does this impinge? In other words, does this worry the GCC states, or how do they react to it? I mean, I could see an argument for this would make them nervous. They want to, interact more with the West. I could also see an argument that this would make them want to redouble their efforts to gain influence and see the Tatarstan and other Muslim republics as a way to do this. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this.
Mark, thank you for this question. If I may just, one comment about the small powers, which you mentioned. I think that in one regard, of terms of the kind of we need to look at it as a quality level. So for I consider GCC states as not small countries. I consider them in terms of the quality, their characteristics, and it's amazing how these states are really projecting power. I just recently been also like asking questions from, for example, Estonian diplomats or Lithuanian diplomats, which are small countries, and I ask them, do you have really like the policies towards the MENA region, towards the GCC states? Most of them, they answer, we are a small state, mostly our interest in the Ukraine war and the kind of Europe. And because we're part of EU, we just follow what kind of EU policies. But this is really, for me, the person who've been like following the Gulf states policies over like 7 years, this is completely, I understand how interesting to follow the GCC states and their quality, and I would say that they already grew as middle powers. So with regards to your question about the Iranian relation with Russia, I think that now Russia more is depending from regional actors, especially from Iran, with these drone kind of opportunities drone that Iranian offers to Russia. And I at the same time, I also see that Russia follows the same policies of balancing with all sides, similar with Iranians and with the GCC states. So I don't see that the Gulf states, it's like my view that they should be very much nervous about that, because it's business as usual. And we saw it in Syria. We see now in Ukraine war. That's my take about that.
Very good. Well, time is drawing short, and I'm wondering if you have any closing remarks that you'd care to share.
Yes, I have. First of all, I just again would like to thank so much Mark and the Gulf International Forum for this opportunity. As a Tatar myself from Republic of Tatarstan and representative of the Muslim population, this project and this book has been very personal. This one, like many other regional populations within USSR and modern Russia, it's difficult for Tatar to be recognized separately from the nation-state context. And what my research makes clear is importance of not treating nations as homogeneous kind of populations. Actually, their variety, especially the Russian multi-ethnic state, is the key facet of political activity. Tatar culture has its own history, its identity, that can be easily obscured, and this book seeks to divert a portion of attention from the global scale towards local, and the fact that Muslim Tatars have been able to create in this case in terms of seeing their relation with the Gulf states. Above all, it's worth remembering the importance of personal connections, individual actions, and points of shared culture in the development of the international relations. And in conducting my field work in various Russian regions, I met Muslim Russians from walks of life, ethnic diplomats, religious scholars, politicians, those involved in business and political process, and those who have been contributing greatly to establish close relations between Soviet and modern Russia and with the GCC states. And my book is an effort to highlight the important work done by this Muslim ethnic population, and they provide an example of for the international community the importance of kind of these Muslim minorities in Russia, even if their actions sometimes cannot be seen without the knowledge of the context. And finally, I have a personal hope that this book will prompt further interest in the future of history of Russian Muslims, both in bridging the foreign policies during the turbulent times and the unique and resourceful agents in their own right. Thank you so much.
Yes, I think your research is, I hope, going to open the door to even more. I think that it's just so important that this question of paradiplomacy, or the relations between the various Russian Muslim republics and, not just the GCC, but the Middle East as a whole and beyond, is a rich vein, I think, for researchers. And I think part of the trouble is that there are very few people such as yourself who have the language skills who are able to do this. I think that's part of why we haven't seen so much attention drawn to it. But just because other people haven't worked on it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be worked on. And so I'm hoping that we will see more of these studies, and of course, among those studies, more by Dr. Diana Galeeva. Well, it just remains for me to thank the Gulf International Forum for arranging this really interesting session. I also want to encourage everyone to read, to either buy yourself or have your institution buy this great book, Russia and the GCC, on the Paradiplomacy of Tatarstan, and I just want now to thank everyone for joining this fascinating session, and I'll just wish you all a good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.